If you're a man who struggled with pornography for very long, you probably heard someone say, you need an accountability partner, or at least heard them talk about accountability. And maybe you've tried to have an accountability relationship before. You've reached out to someone, asked them to hold you accountable, they accept, you meet for coffee, share your stories, get excited about the possibility of change. You meet again and ask each other how your weeks were, you share your successes and failure, and then you fall into a habit of meeting and sharing your failures only to become discouraged. Then, months later, nothing had really changed and you just give up meeting. So, does accountability actually work? Yes, it does, but probably not in the way that you've been taught. Today, I want to show you what real biblical accountability looks like, why so many accountability relationships fail, and how to build one that actually helps you find real freedom. I'm Eddie Traughber. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and Christian counselor. And for over 30 years, I've worked with men overcoming pornography addiction. And I've noticed something interesting. The men who tend to experience lasting freedom almost never do it alone. But they also don't simply have someone that they talk to, they have an accountability relationship. There's a huge difference between just an accountability partner and having an accountability relationship with someone. So let's start by talking about what accountability is not. Accountability is not having someone to play police officer. It's not someone waiting for you to mess up. It's not getting a weekly text that says, did you look at porn? That's behavior monitoring. And it helps for a little while, but by itself, it rarely produces lasting change. And why is that? Because addiction grows in secrecy, in isolation and shame. And checking boxes doesn't eliminate any of those. If all you're doing is reporting failures, you may actually begin to dread talking to your accountability partner. Eventually, you stop taking their calls. You stop answering their texts. Not because you don't want freedom, but because you're tired of disappointing someone. Or because you haven't seen any change and the relationship has dwindled into nothing more than reporting failures. Real accountability is much bigger than catching you doing something wrong. It's helping you become the man that God created you to be. One of my favorite verses is Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Notice something about that. Iron doesn't inspect iron, iron sharpens iron. The goal isn't just exposure, the goal is growth. And that sharpening only happens inside a real relationship. Think about how friendships develop. You meet someone, you spend time together, you begin sharing, you do activities together, and trust begins to develop. Then eventually you reach the point where each of you has permission to challenge the other person. Most men never get that far. We have acquaintances, we have coworkers, we have fishing buddies or golf partners, but very few people know what's really going on inside us. Yet that's exactly where healing begins. So, who should you choose to be an accountability partner? Don't spend months looking for the perfect person to be this accountability partner. He probably doesn't exist. Instead, look for someone who has several qualities. First, choose someone of the same gender. Needs to be another guy. Second, choose someone that you already have trust in. Someone that you may look up to, respect, someone that you know is going to be there for you. Third, choose someone who's actually available. A great accountability partner who never has time isn't going to be much help. And fourth, find someone whose personality fits yours. Some men need someone who's very direct. Others respond better to someone who's gentle but honest. And neither of those is wrong. Finally, choose someone who's spiritually and emotionally mature enough to tell you the truth when you need to hear it. Here's something else that's important. If you're married, your wife should know about your struggle, but she shouldn't carry the entire burden of accountability. She's your wife, not your recovery coach. Every man needs another godly man speaking into his life. Now, let me give you a few practical rules that I've found that make accountability relationships much more effective. First, it's your responsibility to initiate contact. If you're the one seeking help, don't expect your accountability partner to chase you down. They're there to help you. They're not your babysitter. They're not your probation officer. They're volunteering their time because they care about you. So if you're struggling, it's your responsibility to make the call or to reach out and connect with them. That's part of taking ownership of your own recovery. And here's something else that's incredibly important. Don't wait until you've already fallen to reach out to them. The goal of accountability is not simply to confess your failures, although there can be some benefit to that, but the goal instead is to prevent them. If you're sitting there thinking, I probably ought to call my accountability partner, that's usually the moment you need to pick up the phone. Don't argue with yourself. Don't wait another hour. Don't see if you can handle it on your own. Reach out, call them. Second, decide ahead of time what the relationship is going to look like. Don't leave it vague. Vague accountability usually turns into no accountability. I encourage men to meet face to face at least once a week whenever possible. There's simply something about sitting across the table from another man and having an honest conversation that you just can't replace by a phone call or a text. But if distance or schedule makes that impossible, then the bare minimum is have at least a weekly phone call. Text messages and emails are great for checking in during the week, especially if you're having a difficult day, but they should never become the primary way that you stay accountable. Recovery grows through real conversations, not just typed messages. Third, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's very helpful to have more than one accountability partner. Sometimes the first person doesn't answer the phone. Sometimes they're on vacation. Sometimes life gets busy. Their wife has a baby. They get transferred out of state and they're not available to meet face to face. And sometimes an accountability partner simply reaches a point where they need to step away for whatever reason. If you've already built relationships with 2 or 3 godly men, you're never left fighting temptation alone. Finally, and I think this is one of the most overlooked principles, put a time limit on your accountability relationship. A lot of times guys will get together and say, will you be my accountability partner? And the implication is until the end of time, right? I usually recommend shorter time periods, 3 months, 6 months, or at the very most a year. As you get close to the end of that time period, begin looking for another accountability partner to step into that role. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stop being friends or that you can't check in with that person. In fact, a lot of times these type of relationships last for years. But intentionally rotating accountability partners brings in fresh perspective, fresh questions, fresh ideas, and even fresh encouragement. Sometimes a new person notices blind spots that everyone else has stopped seeing. And that fresh energy can keep your recovery from becoming routine or stagnant. The goal isn't to collect accountability partners. The goal is continued growth. And sometimes fresh voices are exactly what God uses to keep us growing. Now, let's say that you found someone and they meet the criteria and they agree to be your accountability partner. What do you actually do in this relationship? First of all, you meet regularly, not just after you've fallen. You meet when things are going well. You build a genuine friendship. You pray together, you encourage one another, then you create what in 12-step circles is known as a bottom line. And your bottom line is simply a personalized list of questions that your accountability partner asks you every single time that you meet. Not generic questions, hey, how you doing? Very specific questions. Have you looked at pornography since the last time we met? Questions that are tailored to you and your particular struggle. For example, did you intentionally view pornography this week? Either hardcore or softcore pornography? Have you been completely transparent and honest with your wife? Did you spend time with God this week? Have you isolated yourself from other people? Have you reached out when temptation first started? Have you managed your stress in healthy ways? Have you been truthful with me today? Notice something. Most of those questions aren't actually about pornography. They're about the life that leads to pornography. Pornography is usually the symptom, the deeper issue, stress, loneliness, isolation, pride, lack of honesty, neglecting your relationship with God. Those are the things that you want your accountability partner helping you address. Your list might include spiritual ideas, relationship issues, financial habits, work stress, or other personal struggles. Everyone's list is different because everyone's battle is different. Don't try to change 20 things all at once. start with one area that most often leads back to your temptation. So, for example, the bottom line for an alcoholic would not simply be, have you consumed alcohol this week? It might be, have you consumed alcohol this week? Do you have any alcohol or have you had any alcohol in your home this week? Since the last time we talked, have you been to any bars or restaurants that serve alcohol? Have you driven down certain streets that you've told me in the past are areas of temptation for you because that's where the beer store is or that's where your favorite bar is? So we need to avoid driving down that street altogether. So those are questions that need to be asked just as much as, have you consumed alcohol this week? Here's what I want you to understand, because I think this is where so many men miss it. There are really two kinds of accountability. The first is confessional accountability, and that's where you're calling your accountability partner up after you've already fallen. You confess, you talk about what happened, you pray together, and there's certainly a place for that. In fact, if you've fallen, don't hide it, do confess it. Bring it into the light as quickly as possible. But if that's the only way you're using accountability, you're always playing defense. You're always cleaning up yesterday's failure. Your goal is to move beyond that. The second kind of accountability is preventative accountability. And this is where real freedom begins. Preventative accountability happens when you call before you fall. You recognize that you're under tremendous stress. You're feeling lonely. You're starting to isolate. You're fantasizing. You're making excuses. Old temptations are coming back into your mind. You're beginning to negotiate with yourself. And instead of thinking, I'll call him if I mess up, you think, I need to call him right now because I don't want to mess up. That's a completely different mindset. Instead of confessing your relapse, you're preventing your relapse. And in my experience, the men who experience the greatest long-term freedom don't make the most confession calls, they make the most prevention calls. They've learned to recognize temptation early enough that they invite another person into the battle before temptation becomes behavior. If you're ever sitting there thinking, I probably ought to call my accountability partner, don't argue with yourself. Don't wait another hour. Don't see if you can handle it on your own. That's the moment you've got to pick up the phone and make that call. Because accountability works best before temptation wins and not after. Over time, you'll find yourself making fewer confessional calls and more preventative ones. To me, that's one of the clearest signs that real recovery is taking place. You're no longer just reacting to failure, you're learning to prevent it. And that's where lasting freedom begins. And one thing that a lot of people confuse is they think, well, if I have accountability, then I should have less temptation. And that's simply not the case. You can't stop the enemy from tempting you. You can't remove yourself from a society that literally uses sex to advertise and market everything. Temptation's always going to be there. It's how you respond to it in the moment that determines whether you win this struggle or lose it. And in my experience, accountability usually doesn't fail because someone picked the wrong accountability partner. It fails because no one follows through. Life gets busy, meetings stop, you expect them to fix you, or phone calls become less frequent, then isolation quietly returns. And the Bible says in Proverbs 12:15, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. And Proverbs 15 tells us that those who accept correction gain understanding. Receiving correction requires humility. It means admitting, I don't have to have all the answers. That can be hard, especially for men who are used to handling everything themselves, but that's exactly where wisdom begins. Now, if you've been trying to overcome pornography by yourself, let me encourage you. Stop fighting alone, not because you're weak, because God never designed us to fight alone. Real accountability isn't primarily about confessing yesterday's failure. It's about inviting someone into today's battle so tomorrow's failures never happen. Find men who will encourage you, challenge you, pray with you, celebrate your victories, and remind you of who you are in Christ when you stumble. That's what real accountability looks like. And if you don't have anyone in your life right now that fits that, there are tons of recovery groups. There are Bible-based recovery groups in lots of churches. Get online and do some searching. Find a group like Celebrate Recovery or a group that deals specifically with pornography addiction, and there you will find men who are in the same position that you're in and who are looking for other godly men to hold them accountable. And over time, those kind of relationships don't just help people quit pornography, they help shape them into stronger husbands, better fathers, better friends, better leaders, and more faithful men of God. Now, if anything in this video helped you, please like and subscribe for more information. I'm building an entire series on overcoming pornography from a Christian perspective, not with shame, but with practical tools and biblical truth. Thanks for watching. See you next time.